Okay, good evening. The Design Review Board public meeting of October 27, 2016 is called to order. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones at this time. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants, is asked to completely fill out one of the speaker cards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a project that is returned for redesign by the Design Review Board must completely fill out one of the postcards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff to receive notice of subsequent meetings. Current Design Review Board agendas are available by visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. Please note that appeals must be filed within 15 calendar days of the Design Review Board decision date. The chairperson may reorder agenda items at his or her discretion. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Benlian.
Here.
Board Member Charchian.
Here.
Board Member Malikian.
Here.
And Chairman Simonian. Chairman Simonian is absent this evening. The agenda for this meeting, and I apologize, since the chairman is absent this evening, we will have to elect a chair pro tem. So is there a motion?
I would like to nominate Mr. Charchian.
I second that.
Right?
Okay,
you.
I'll assume the role of Chair Pro Tem. Thank you.
Thank you. The report regarding posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before 5 p.m. on October 20th, 2016. Oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. I have no oral communication cards, and I do not believe any have been submitted.
I have not received any myself.
Okay, which brings us to the Design Review Board calendar. First item would be staff announcements, and we regret to announce that Design Review Board member Brej Mardian passed away last week. Mr. Mardian had been on the Design Review Board for the last 3 years, and prior to that, he had served on the city's Building and Fire Board of Appeals, as well as having completed 2 terms on the Historic Preservation Commission. Mr. Mardian was also a board member of the Glendale Historic Society. Staff truly enjoyed working with Mr. Mardian, and we greatly respected and appreciated his thoughtful architectural analysis, his preservationist perspective, his sense of humor, his service to the community, and dedication to the built environment. We would like to extend our deepest condolences to his family, and he will sorely be missed on this Design Review Board.
Thank you.
Which leaves us at this point in time, I would like to turn the hearing over to Chair Pro Tem Charchian for the rest of the agenda.
Thank you, and I'm sure that my fellow board members join me in expressing our own sincere condolences to the family of our colleague who is no longer with us, and we will be adjourning this meeting in his honor. But as he would have liked, we were going to press on and go into the first case, PDR 1614893, 1820 Oak Knoll Road. And the first speaker card that I have here is for Mr. I'm sorry, will staff please read the report? I apologize for this project. And being presented by Ms. Babakani.
Good evening, members of the board. The project before you is Design Review Case Number PDR 1614893, located at 1820 Oak Knoll Road. The applicant is proposing to add 793 square foot one-story addition at the northeast side of the front facade of the existing house, and also adding an enclosed front courtyard at the northwest side of the existing house, along with a new porch. The proposal will change the architectural style of the existing house from minimal traditional to contemporary eclectic style. And the existing house is a one-story, 1,725 square foot single family on a 9,580 square foot lot, zone R1R, floor area ratio district 2. The lot has an average current slope of 15.78% from north to south and a gradual slope from east to west. The property is located on the south side of Oaknall Road, which is a cul-de-sac street. The existing 1,725 square foot single-family residence has a setback from the street frontage of approximately 45 feet. The new addition, which is going to be visible from the street, will reduce the front setback to 15 feet and 4 inches. There are no proposed changes to the existing detached two-car garage and its driveway. For the site planning, the proposed site planning is not consistent with the surroundings in terms of maintaining the front yard open space, especially for the proposed enclosed courtyard concept. Staff recommends condition of approval to reduce the height of the courtyard wall facing Oaknall Road to align with the proposed window sill height at the front facade and to maintain this wall height along the west side of the proposed front courtyard, with the exception of the proposed fireplace, and also to eliminate the proposed metal trellis above the courtyard walls. Staff believes that this revised design with the condition that I mentioned would be consistent with the overall design and the neighborhood concept, and allows the outdoor area to integrate better into open space as recommended in the Glendale Hillside Design Guideline. In terms of the mass and the scale, the size and scale of the addition is appropriate to the existing context. However, staff thinks the proposal appears overly complicated and in certain locations overscaled. Staff recommends condition of approval to simplify roof forms and, as I mentioned, to reduce the height of the courtyard wall and to eliminate the front courtyard metal trellis, which will help the addition be more appropriate to the surroundings in terms of its mass and scale. The overall roof form is acceptable with this condition to simplify it, which are maintaining the pitch of the existing roof, which is 4 to 12, redesign the light monitor elements over the entryway, and also redesign the front porch roof to be a flat roof, and eliminate the front entry overhang or redesign it. In terms of the design and detailing, the addition proposed contemporary eclectic design is overly inconsistent and complicated. Staff recommends condition of approval to simplify some of the proposed architectural features to provide consistency in overall architectural details and design. A condition of approval is recommended to reduce the size and to center the proposed window on the west wall of the entry element. A condition of approval is recommended to replace the proposed stone veneer on the front facade and replace it with a stucco finish. And the condition of approval is recommended to revise the proposed window installation method to be appropriately recessed from the face of the wall. In overall, staff recommends approval of this project with the condition that I mentioned, plus showing the decorative material for the proposed 3-foot high retaining wall as a condition, and to reduce the width of the proposed entry walkway in order to create more landscaped area, and also to show on the site plan that 2 trees on the public right-of-way will be maintained. Staff didn't receive any comments for this project from the public, and that includes my presentation. I will be available for your questions.
Are there questions for staff?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Lucan?
So can we go down the list, and I want to know exactly what you specifically are asking. Let's say redesign the light monitor element over the front entry roof to be the one with the metal roof, the dark gray roof with the clear story above. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
When you say redesign, and do you mean that? Well, can you point it out so at least I know and everybody else which one we're talking about?
This is the element that we're talking
Right.
about.
So you're saying keep it but redesign it.
Yes, eliminate, keep it or redesign it. But
Redesign the
elimination
light
is for
monitor
this
element.
overhang here, this overhang roof.
Which one?
the-
I'm sorry, which one?
This.
And you're
We're recommending
saying
to eliminate these elements or redesign it, because we think this doesn't quite work with the overall design.
Right, okay, let's go down the list. Okay, so redesign the light monitor element, which is this.
Yes.
So keep it but redesign it. Then redesign the front porch roof, which is
this.
so this area. So you're
That's the
saying that
porch.
okay, so this area will be simplified. Okay, and then eliminate the front entry overhang, which is this, or redesign. Okay. And reduce the size of the center or window. So this is the
We
one
are
you're talking
talking about
This
this
one, right?
window at the side, correct?
Okay. Remove the proposed stone veneer. This is the one that
Yes,
you're talking
correct.
about.
Which will be this stone veneer at the front.
And then reduce the height of the front courtyard wall north of this.
Yes.
Okay.
So we are recommending to reduce this wall height to make it in line it with the proposed window sill, which is this, and to continue this height to the west side.
So we're just talking about lowering this
Yes,
so it's in
correct.
line with that. So, okay. And then provide revised drawings to show decorative materials for the proposed 3-foot retaining wall. So the proposed
going
retaining
to
wall
be-
is this, right? Not the
Yes.
existing, but this one.
Yes, that's a neighbor's wall. This is the proposed.
So if you look at the section, which is there, or sorry, here,
Yes, we
not
are
this.
proposing, we are asking to propose material, decorative material for that face.
for this.
Yes.
Okay. These steps are,
Sections cut through the stair, not the wall.
There is stairs.
through here.
Yes.
Okay.
This is
So
the
then,
stairs.
this is an existing retaining wall.
This is a proposed. There is existing now, and with this
Okay, I will ask,
addition,
we'll ask the
moving
architect.
forward, they're
Okay.
proposing a new retaining.
And then indicate the plan. Okay, that's all I wanted to.
And the reason for the finished material on that wall, is it visible from the street?
Retaining wall?
Mhm.
Yes. Look at the side plan. This is the retaining wall. That would be visible from this side.
Okay.
And you're talking about matching the existing pitch. Ones we're
Okay,
talking
the
about.
roof plan,
I just wanted to clearly
which is
understand the
this
exact
area.
location.
This is the existing house with the 412 pitch roof, and that area is a proposed. None of those roofs are matching with this pitch.
So
with the
that
existing.
five.
We're
12,
recommending
you want
to
be
just make it compatible with the existing. Is there any other
And
questions?
redesigning the roof,
Yes, please.
simplify the roof.
Are there any more questions for staff?
No?
Okay, I have no questions at this time. Thank you. I'll now open the hearing for public comments and also to hear, it looks like, just from the architect team. Arthur Jemian is the owner. You would like to go first, or would you like your architect to go first? Mr. Garagos? Please state your name and address for the record.
Mike Argus, architect and applicant, 2155 Verdugo, number 614 Montrose, 91020. Thank you all for being here. I would like to go through the elements. I think we're in agreement that the overall massing is consistent, so the question is some of the detailing that has come up in staff comments. I did want to show you one thing, just, and I can leave it with staff, is that we provided an entire set of plans, keynoted to the neighbors, and had their review and sign. Both adjoining neighbors and the neighbor across the street were in support of the
Mr.
project.
Garagos, you need to speak into the
Oh,
microphone.
sorry. I was going to show you the plan. We developed a plan, or printed out a plan, and put a keynote giving the opportunity for the neighbors to sign the plan, and both adjacent ones and additional ones around the neighborhood were in compliance, were in agreement with the project. So submitted to staff.
Thank you.
Okay, again, thank you all for being here. It's a fairly straightforward design. What they're trying to do is add livable space to the house. It's not bedrooms, so consequently, the only way to really do this, without any kind of hardship, is to put it in the front. There's a very large front setback, and we're adding essentially a living room and a dining room. So consequently, that couldn't go on the second floor. So it's the only really spot for this to happen. Because of that, it generates a space, an outdoor space for the house that's very integral to those spaces. So it needs a certain amount of privacy just because of the way it's going to be used and the openness to it. So we'll go through the items just so you understand why we have that space and why it's important. Let me just go down the list. The roof should match the existing 4 and 12. There's not a problem with that. I don't see a problem with matching the existing pitch, and we can verify the existing pitch and make sure we match that.
Is that the only thing? The only thing that will happen is your ceiling heights and everything else will change unless you're.
They're vaulted single story, so that it could handle a modified pitch. I'm not happy about it. If the board would let us continue that different pitch, I think it's not as visible.
Okay.
I think it can be consistent. If the board would be inclined, I would like to keep it as it is, but if it was necessary. Redesign the light monitor over the entry porch. I think it could get smaller, but you may not realize it, but the element over the chimney is a metal cap also. So this one was consistent within that. We were developing that sort of feel for those two elements. We looked at many different configurations for that. I don't think the flat roof works on it. I think it's too dissimilar for the element to be a flat roof, so we designed that one. I could see where it could probably diminish in size slightly, but I don't see a problem with it being as a pyramidal shape. The element, the overhang, actually, let me just go to the list. The porch roof, if she means the one off the family room, that one is as consistent as any porch roof on any house in the city. That's a gable roof coming out, and we're doing a lower pitch porch roof, shed roof coming out from it. That's as consistent as you can be with any home in the neighborhood or anywhere in the city. That's just how a porch roof is done, a lower pitch coming off the end. It allows for a clear story window into the family room, so any redesign of that I think would be unfortunate. Again, a flat roof on that area would be unnecessarily dissimilar to the rest of the structure. There's only a couple of areas that are flat, and they're very targeted, and I'll get to it on the line items, but we developed a light trellis that goes along the front. It's an L-shaped, asymmetrical, and the element that's over the entry is just a play on that. There's an overhang to one side, which is the trellis, and a slight overhang in the other direction, which is the entry element. So those two are working together. They would be colored similar. They're both metal elements, so those work together as a design scheme. So if you go to... and that would be 4. So we think the entry element is consistent. It's working off of the element of the trellis. And then number 5, again, works within that. That trellis element is a playful asymmetrical inverted L, and the window is playing with that. The window is off-center. As that is off-center, you're getting a balanced composition. So there's no reason that should be centered. I mean, totally unnecessary that would be centered. It's facing into the courtyard. If you look at the plan, that's essentially a corner window. There's an element that faces west and faces south from the entry. So it's supposed to be a very open entry, and the only way you could really do that, realistically, is to have it oriented towards the corner. So centering it and diminishing it would be unnecessary. There's no reason to do that. It's totally facing into the private area. The stone veneer on the fireplace, I think we could probably, everybody would have their own opinion in terms of material, but I think it would be unnecessary to diminish or to remove the option of doing stone. It is a fireplace. It would show as a fireplace. There's no reason it would go to stucco and not a stone. We could probably discuss what the stone would be or brick, but to turn it to plaster seems unnecessary.
Quick question on that. As you turn, because you can't see it on the elevation because of So you do have stone coming around the top and everything, so the
Right.
stone will wrap around.
It shows as a chimney, yeah.
All right, and then the face, you're basically the stone and the
It should wrap the corner on the bottom also, yeah.
and the bottom, but
Yeah.
on the face of the building, they're both in line, and they're just going to they have some
Right.
reveal thickness. Okay.
Right, exactly. And I think it needs to be a stone or a brick and not plaster. I think plaster, it would be getting more commercial look as opposed to a...
Could we just make, on the drawings, it doesn't show any kind of return of,
I was saying we
Stone.
could return it around the east side if that was important.
yeah,
Is
it only shows
But
like
it returns on the chimney, so it shows as a chimney. The stone does wrap the chimney.
Sorry to speak over staff, I apologize. Is there a material board?
There is, somewhere. It was submitted.
Was that-
There's a picture of a travertine.
There's a picture of travertine.
It's a picture of a travertine.
All right, I think you're on number 8 at this point.
Yeah. I reduced the height of the front courtyard wall. We are in agreement that it would go to the bottom of the window. That's not a problem. I think it is unnecessary to lower it all the way back to the family room. There could be a 6-foot fence on the property line, 15 foot away from the front setback. So to alleviate that little piece back there seems, unreal, not fair. I mean, you could have a fence on the property
Okay,
line.
I'm sorry, which one are we talking about?
Number 8.
I'm going to ask that, I understand that you have some strong opinions on it, but in the interest of time, because we're also over the initial period, let's not argue about
Okay,
what
sure.
it is. Just let's have you indicate
I think
which things you can work with, which things you can't at this point.
Okay, 8, I think there's an issue about where it could be consistent, but I think it doesn't need to diminish all the way around.
Okay.
9, we would have no problem talking with staff about an appropriate material. It could be a slump stone, whatever. Revisit the proposed walkway, that would be fine. There's no problem with that. And then, of course, we would notate the trees as maintained.
Okay. So for 10, 11, you have no issue with those.
Yes.
So 9, 10, 11.
9, 10, 11. We could work with staff on those items. And on the window, and I guess I'm missing the window. The window was a block frame recessed. That's what shows on the detail. So if there was, we could work with staff on the
Blocked
detail.
frame or is nail on?
That's a conflict that's still being resolved with building, as you know. There's an issue of what's, but it is block framed in terms of planning definition. Nail on doesn't work as a block frame, but that's planning calls it a block frame, and that is block frame noted in the detail.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Jemian? We're withdrawing your speaker card? Okay. All right. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on this matter? Okay, hearing no other speakers, I'll go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing and open it up to deliberation. Want to go first? Mr. Likin?
A very nice design. You've done a really nice job. I mean, very simple, but yet very elaborate. You have a lot of details, a lot of things happening. I think it's very consistent. I really like this contemporary flavor that you've added on, but yet you kept some of these rustic details intact. I just have a general comment. Projects like these, I think we shouldn't be getting 10 corrections or 11 corrections. I think it's more of kind of going through these plans that I'm looking at. Majority of them, it's consideration, in my opinion. I really don't think this dictates this many corrections, in my opinion. I think it should be the applicants that they are proposing something new and innovative should be praised rather than penalized for a lot of these things. I agree that there's certain things, 5 and 12, 4 and 12. If it looks good, I'm okay with it. If it was 4 and 12 and he was coming in with a 12 12 and 12 pitch. I mean, there's like two different. It's just so slightly. I don't even think it's necessary to even put it in. Redesign the light monitor. I still think that it can be a consideration. For me, it's not a deal breaker. Redesign the front porch flat. Again, I agree. I don't think it's getting into so much of these details that, if we want to get into this kind of criticism and review of these plans, there's so many other things that, so many other projects that will dictate to be so critical. But in this particular project, I think it's a really nice design. I really like it. The colors are very consistent. It's consistent with the neighborhood. Neighbors like it. So going down the list of stuff, the overhang, I'm okay with it. Removal of stone, I completely disagree with staff. I don't think it should be removed. I like the stone. I like the limestone that it's on there. I don't think stucco. It needs to have some contrast in the front. So I really like the way it's designed, and then especially the overhangs. I agreed lowering the little wall there, but again, I mean, we're talking about 6 inches, I think. But I don't think it's. But the whole detail, I really like the detail, the way that the column comes in and it cuts into the little stem wall. That whole section needs to be lowered. I don't think it should be lowered so that it's all flat. So the detail that you have is really nice, and I think the whole thing. But again, if we lower this, we have to look at around it so it just doesn't get so low that it doesn't become non-functional on the side. So I'm assuming that because it has some function around the corner, that's why the height is set. So maybe in that case, you may want to eliminate the stone around the doors, and so you have a break between the stone below the window and that. But again, this is just kind of going into it, really nitpicking on these things. The window around the side, I agree. I think it's proportioned within the frame, the L frame. And there's already a function behind it. So moving that, the closet is eliminated. But that's why it's moved over. Plus the L shape, I think it's nestled within that. So looking at it in an angle, I don't think it's going to be a problem. Reducing the width of the walkway, I like the perspective, and I don't know if it's going to be planted some native planting, maybe some succulents, some nice gravel and some lighting and some effects there that I think is going to bring that really cool, clean, minimal look. Again, it's a consideration in my opinion. As far as the stone, the retaining wall, and other. If they've gone through all of these, I'm sure they're going to come up with something really nice that is consistent. So if the wall that we're talking about is the property line wall, I wasn't clear because of the section. That section cuts through and it shows a new retaining wall against the property line, but the comment, but on the elevation shows the existing property or retaining wall. So either one, if it's a new, then it should be obviously consistent. If it's an existing, I think some sort of I don't know if we can put stucco on the retaining wall on the. So some texture somehow, I don't know if it, and stone cannot be put on. Can they? Okay. Well, then you can kind of veneer it with some stone and something. Other than that, I think the majority of them is consideration, in my opinion. I think it's a really nicely designed, and fine tuning here and there. I agree, but I don't think it's even necessary for me to even comment.
Okay, Spania.
Yes, I'm going to agree with Mr. Malikian. It's a well-designed addition. Good choice with the color selection. Most of these items look like considerations as well. The only one that I would ask to do is the stone where the fireplace, just to to return it on the east side as well. So
I agree. I think it should come back far enough as maybe
come
the
back.
same depth as the
same
chimney depth, so that kind of wraps inside, gives you.
absolutely. So that's the only one. And I'm finding another kind of stone veneer for the retaining wall. And other than that, I mean, it's well designed, well detailed. I also like same thing Mr. Malikian mentioned. I like the mix of the styles. I think it's well done, and it's going to be a good-looking house.
Okay. In reviewing this, I actually saw where staff was going, because I think that if you look at the neighborhood context here, you have a lot of ranch style, you have an older neighborhood, and you have what's basically a modern structure and modern interpretation of materials being placed in to this neighborhood. I think the execution of it, and I'm not a modernist, but I think the execution of it is acceptable, but there are areas of concern, and that's, I think, where staff was going with their comments. For me, the trellis, for example, is an area of concern. You have it as a grape. You've identified on the landscaping plan as a grape trellis, common grapevine. So we're going to have this stone veneer, then we're going to have this wood and plaster, and then you're going to have some concrete, and then you're going to have this, hopefully, a greenscape of grapes. Good luck with the grapes in that area. It's maybe, hard to get them to produce really well, but ideally you're going to have that. And the thing is, you look at that palette, and then you look at the neighboring houses, and it doesn't quite fit for me. But I sense that I'm in the minority, so I won't comment on that much further than that. I think that you need to address some of the hardscaping issues. You've already consented that those are things that are okay. So I'd like to keep 8, 9, 10, and 11 as conditions and not recommendations. I think that resizing that window in the front, because it is in the front, slightly is appropriate. I agree that the stone could work. I think the execution of that is going to be really the key. If it's done well, it will look nice. If it's not executed properly, it I think will be problematic detail, which is what I think staff was concerned about, opting for the plaster for more uniformity. Other than that, I think that's it. The other condition I would ask is we need to have some specifications as to how the joints are going to work on that stone. We don't want to have that left up to guessing upon installation. I think we need to have it specified. Other than that, I'm okay with the project.
So I don't think we put any conditions. We just went down staff's conditions. So
We
there's
did.
nothing
The
new.
only
So-
condition I would want to add is that I'd want to get a detail on the stone returns.
Or the
and
stone
so-
to return. So I'll move to approve, but I'll go down the list of the conditions, which I think it should be consideration and which should be condition.
Okay.
So 4 and 12 or 5 and 12, to me, it's. I mean, I think yeah. So it's not.
You're not going to see it.
Yeah. So consideration, but heavily towards. Conditions, so I'll make that a consideration. Redesign the light monitor, consideration. Redesign the front porch roof to be flat roof. I would say consideration. Eliminate the front entry overhang, again, consideration. Reduce the size of the center window to the west, consideration. Remove proposed, I would remove that whole thing, but I would put it under consideration. Revise the installation method of proposed windows to be appropriate face, and I'll leave that as a condition. Reduce the height of the front courtyard wall, consideration. provide revised drawings to show the decorative material condition. Reduce width of the proposed walkway to appear overscale increase. There is no, when you says reduce, is there a dimension that we're looking for? Is it just like if they come back with 2 inches less, that's reduced?
Not 2 inches less, but
So I mean, what would you consider? I mean, if I say yes, reduce, and you're going to come back and, technically it's reduced. So is it like, is there a nominal dimension that we're looking for? 6 inches?
By at least
Is that
6
something?
By at least 6 inches? What is it currently?
I think if you look, I think the feeling by staff was that if you look at that general area,
It's all concrete.
it's a lot of concrete, which is not what our standards are. And so
But
we're
I
looking
can see the
for like a
direction that
modest.
it's going. I really can see the direction that it's going. They have cut out a piece from that concrete. They're going to do certain things to it. They have the landscape plans, and they have some elements that I think it's gravel, if I'm not mistaken, or something there. So I'm really excited to see this. Actually, yeah, assorted succulents. So they're going to have succulents within the steps itself, and these are. I'm assuming that we're going to have some sort of an acid wash or something there that is going to contrast with the regular concrete. So I kind of like that because if it's reduced, then they're going to have more planting. That means more watering. There is more. So I kind of
Staff is not in disagreement about
so
design.
so any size that we're let's I'll leave it as reduced. And you be the judge.
Staff wasn't asking to cut it in half or anything like that.
So I say minimum 2 inches. Max, is that good?
I'm not going to be in support of dictating actual inches. Because,
okay, then let's not.
What's
Let's
going to
not
happen
put.
is we're
Let's not
going
put
to have
inches.
other people
Okay.
come down at the next hearing, and they're going to say, okay, well, how many inches do you want us to cut off? So I think,
reducing it. I mean, they can come back with an inch, and it's reduced technically, right?
of course,
Okay.
and staff
All right.
will say that
Okay,
was
then.
not the direction of the
Okay.
board because I would say that I would want to say.
Well, I'll make sure that whatever they come back with, it doesn't matter how many inches, it's approved, as long as it's less. It doesn't matter what it is. Okay, so I'm happy with what if they come back less.
so that would be a condition or consideration?
That would be condition. As long as it's less reduced, I'm happy with it. So, indicate on plans condition.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, is there another condition? Are there any other conditions?
And
that
the
we-
two other
And the
conditions.
joints.
The joints. Can we have those read into the record?
And to make sure that the stone would turn the wall.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was condition 12 and detail.
Condition
Joint
13
detail.
to provide.
We might reorder those simply because
Sure.
we tend to put the conditions at the front and then the considerations
Sure.
at the end.
That's fine.
So, but we will make sure that the conditions regarding the stone on the fireplace wrap the corner in the same thickness as the chimney, and that the joints on the stone wall
Providing the details.
to provide the details. Correct.
And we have second.
I seconded
was a
that
second.
motion.
So,
This is a roll call for motion with approve with condition and consideration. Mr. Malikian,
Yes.
Mr. Bellion,
Yes.
and Mr. Churchin.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
thank you. Now,
So we're going to take a 2-minute to 1-minute break, 2-minute break, so we can set up for the next matter on the calendar, which is the South Glendale Community Plan and Environmental Impact Report presentation by staff.
We're back on. We're back on.
We're back on. Thank you. All right, we're back on, and we're going to go to the next matter on the calendar, the South Glendale Community Plan and Environmental Impact Report, presentation by staff. And it looks like it's Ms. Stotler who's going to be presenting. Thank you.
Chair Charchian and members of the Design Review Board, my name is Laura Stotler. I'm a principal planner with the city. And thank you for letting us come here tonight. We want to give you an overview of the South Glendale Community Plan as it stands today. It's a long process. The reason we're here is that you will be charged with making a recommendation on portions of the South Glendale Community Plan to the Planning Commission. The community plan area covers everywhere south of the 134 freeway, and also a portion north of the 134 freeway between Brand Boulevard and Central up to Glen Oaks. And so this is a depiction of the area.
Would you like me to address the lights?
Oh, would you please? Thank you.
So, and if you can,
you might be able to see better if we
presentation
dim the lights a bit. Why South Glendale? South Glendale has roughly half the city's residents, 75% of the city's transit users, 80% of the residents are renters, 84% of the dwellings are multifamily. And for this reason, we're pretty much looking at a transit-driven plan. We also know there's a retail hub. We have the Americana. We also have the Glendale Galleria. We also have a major hospital down there. We have the Brand Boulevard of cars. And we also have our Larry Zarian Transportation Center, which has Amtrak service. So the purpose of the community plan is to tie past planning efforts into one plan. Over the years, since the last time we did our land use element, we've had roughly 30 different projects that we've done in South Glendale. That's basically been since 1986. But those efforts have been individual. We haven't ever combined those into one document to really explain what's going on in South Glendale and what we want to see for growth in the future. So that's why we're doing this plan. We're going to update our neighborhood vision. Community plan is part of our overall general plan. And as part of a general plan, we do have principles and vision that we'll be identifying for this area. We're looking at guiding development as a horizon of 2040. We're going to be looking at the changing land use patterns, identify sustainable land use patterns. We're very concerned with community character. That's why we're here with you. We have design guidelines included as part of the community plan for different neighborhoods. And then we also need to address regional policies and initiatives such as greenhouse gas reduction, sustainability, and then we also have a regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategies from SCAG that we also need to address. So when you look at the plan and the maps behind you, we've identified the way we look at the community in terms of how we want to see change. We're looking for South Glendale as basically maintain, enhance, or transform. And you'll see those colors on the maps. When you start, I'll go through the different alternatives, but you'll see as we talk about the different alternatives, that's where we're expecting change. Maintain, we're looking at less than 1% change. Enhance, we're looking at perhaps up to 10 to 20% change. And then transform, we're looking at 30% change. These are based on past changes that we have seen in our neighborhoods. Transform, think of our downtown area. Enhance, we're thinking of our corridors. And then maintain are basically our residential areas. In the community plan, we also identify neighborhoods. Neighborhoods are residential areas. And most of these are listed as maintained, but Chris will go over these in a little bit. She's going to talk about what we're looking at in terms of how we're going to have the neighborhoods designed. But this is a general idea of how we're looking at having a community plan ID different neighborhoods. We'll have a map of the area. We'll have general statistics of an area, the number of units, the square footage of the area, population. We're also going to have some pictures identifying what key landmarks are in those neighborhoods or identifying features. Tropico, this is what area that's really driving it. This is the area that's right around our train station. We have the hospital, which is right off of Central and Los Feliz. We know that the hospital's already told us they have plans to expand. We know they need to definitely improve their acute care facilities, as do all hospitals in California by 2020. And so we're looking at a plan that can accommodate their growth. We also know that we have our train station in this area. So as part of the transit-oriented development, we're following state policies to look at how we can make the transit center more effective. How can we make it more accessible to new users? And how can we make densities make transit work in this area? So as part of this the TOD area, we're looking at affordable housing and standards for TOD. This would be mixed-use standards throughout this whole area. We're also looking at creating a gateway to Glendale. Because this is our gateway to Glendale and Los Angeles. We have transit-oriented public spaces that we're looking at putting in, particularly along Cerritos, where we're looking at putting in a linear park that would lead to the neighborhood of Tropico area. We're also looking at having designed streets, so you'll see street standards included as part of the community plan. So here's our project alternatives. Alternative 1, this is basically built on the transit line we already have. So this would be looking at our transit line that goes down Los Feliz, up Central, and out Broadway. And we'd be looking at essentially adding density where it's already at, adding density along Central where transit is already serving the area, and then again into the Tropico area, which is served by not only our transit system, LA's transit system, but also the Metrolink. And again, areas that are yellow, those would be areas of maintain. We're not looking at making changes much in those areas, but we are looking at having enhancements that would be in what we're thinking of as centers. And Chris will go over those a little bit, but we're looking at Verdugo, East Colorado, Glendale Community College, Adams Square area, Pacific Edison, Pacific Avenue Gateway. This is Pacific Avenue at the 134. And then at this point, we're not looking at making any changes to the Brown Boulevard of Cars. We may have some enhancements to South Glendale. And here's some other features that we're looking at. Alternative 1, essentially maintaining neighborhood character, creating walkable streets. We're looking at economic development potential, where there is some, especially where you have neighborhoods joining corridors, open space and parks enhancements, pedestrian safety enhancements, similar to the ones we've already seen gone on that we've done around many of the city schools. Thinking particularly around Doran, it's very close to us. You can walk up there and see it. And also infill housing and development. For Alternative 2, this would be an enhancement to transportation based on what happens essentially with Measure M that's going to the voters shortly. What this option does is it looks at the addition of, we have not only our existing transit network, but then we're also looking at the addition of a BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit, which is part of that Measure M proposal. That would be connections with Rapid Bus to Pasadena. So you're looking at improving, potentially having service down Colorado and then north on Central, out on Glen Oaks. And if this is approved by the voters, then we would have potential to have increasing densities for residential development along and commercial development along Colorado, and then also the neighborhoods on either side of both Colorado and Broadway. Again, Colorado, we're looking at hoping that's where the Bus Rapid Transit would go, and then up and down Central. And anywhere you see this hatched, that's where we're looking at bumping up residential densities for affordable housing density. We may be looking at, as part of these enhancements, pedestrian-friendly streets, bike lanes and bike hubs, expanded transit service and amenities that would include connections to the Bus Rapid Transit, transit-adjacent housing. Densities that we're looking at perhaps with transit-adjacent housing would be going back to the R1250. That is our high-density housing. A lot of that area was previously zoned that, although it was down-zoned in the 80s. We would be looking at bringing that density back up. To R1250, we're also looking at streetscape enhancements. And then this is Project Alternative 3. This is the most, aggressive in terms of planning efforts of what we would be looking at. This is also based on a build-out should we have not only the Bus Rapid Transit Measure M approved. Measure M would also include far out in the future. It's also looking at having an extension of light rail line to Pasadena, and then on out to the city, perhaps to North Hollywood. We'll be looking at adding additional transit stops. That's what these stars are. We're also looking at expansion of the Metrolink line with high-speed rail. So we were looking at having not only our existing transit stop, but perhaps adding a transit stop that we would like to see at Colorado and Pacific, right where we have the area by Pacific Edison. This model also includes wherever you would have enhanced the enhanced regional improvements. We would also look at bumping up the neighborhoods that are adjacent to it. So here we would have basically a small village center. We would look at bumping densities there, Verdugo Road, Pacific Avenue Gateway, Pacific Edison, and then also, again, Tropico. This one would also include enhancements to GCC because the community college has indicated they're interested in expanding. This also alternative has one transit alternative that's not regional, that would be local if we're looking at doing it. That would be a potential trolley that would run down. It would run from our transit station up Brand Boulevard and then out Glen Oaks. And that would be the only transit improvement proposed here that would be locally funded. Everything else would be like a result of a regional action. And again, we're also looking at alternative 3, expansion of integrated open space, multimodal streets, multiple activity centers, multiple transit centers, and also transformed opportunity sites when you have a lot of opportunity to have opportunity for transit. You also have opportunity for higher density mixed use. And in that case, we think that will spur development in those areas. That's part of the reason why we're looking at not only bumping up the density, because we think demand will be there for it. And then I should also say alternative 3, and I have the board behind you, that is the alternative that we are calling the project. If you're familiar with Environmental Quality Act, we have to have a project identified and then alternatives that would have lesser environmental impact. So in this case, the alternative 3 is our greatest. We anticipate that would have the greatest level of impact. That is the project we would like to see in terms of policies for our future. But alternative 2 and alternative 3, or alternative 1 would be lesser alternatives. Space 134 is also included for a study. I think you've seen that before, but we're looking at freeway cap. That would include walking trails, gardens, event space, transit amenities. And again, this would be something that would be out in the future. It would have future funding outside the city, but we are accommodating for that in this plan under Alternative 3. So the environmental impact report is a public process right now. We just closed the notice of preparation, and it's under review today. They're actually not under public review. It's under the comments that have come in from other agencies. We're reviewing those now to finalize the scope of work to create the document. We anticipate that we will have the document out in the spring. We're hoping as early as February, late January maybe. Right now we have community input that we're taking on the city's website. We have surveys in English, Armenian, and Spanish that are available for anybody to take. There's our website. We also have an event that we're planning, the Halloween Spooktacle. It's this weekend at Cerritos Park. And this is the location if anybody wants to mail us. This is our City Hall address. Some people are still on snail mail, and we would love to have them mail their comments to us. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chris.
Okay. In your advisory capacity regarding design guidelines, urban form, and placemaking, the Design Review Board will be making a recommendation to Planning Commission, as Laura indicated. But since the design guidelines are a large part of the South Glendale Community Plan project, what I'm going to do is give you a brief overview of how the guidelines are shaping up. And this is also an opportunity for you to give us any kind of feedback that you may have at this point in time on how we're proceeding. Laura talked about the breakdown of South Glendale into a collection of places and the policy vision for each of these places as defined in the plan as either maintain, enhance, or transform. But staff also needed a way to organize the design guidelines documentation of these places in an understandable manner. As an urban design framework, we've organized individual places into development groups that include centers, corridors, neighborhoods, and districts. Districts include areas like parks, open space, campuses, cemeteries, transportation, and civic uses. So for our discussion tonight, we're going to sort of put them on the wayside since we won't be doing guidelines for those. Each of these development groups, the centers, corridors, and neighborhoods, are subdivided in order from highest intensity of development to the lowest. For example, under neighborhoods, something that you'd be familiar with are the multifamily at the highest allowable density to single family, and then single family hillside at the lowest density. Each of these subgroups would have individual guidelines written for them, design guidelines. So you can see there are quite a few subgroups here. What I'm going to do is walk you through just the centers and a portion of the centers area to give you a lay of the land and how they're developed. A transition page for each development group is included. It defines what centers are. It lists the types of centers. It provides a representative image for each type of center, and it maps the various centers' locations within South Glendale using a representative color coding system. So under centers, we have downtown, urban center, town center, village center. The downtown, again, we won't have guidelines for since there is a specific, a downtown-specific plan written for it. An urban center, an example would be the Tropico TOD. The village center, Adams Square, is an example. I'm going to talk about the town center as an example, again, to show you how this is organized. If we look at the section on town centers, it begins with a description of what a town center is and its characteristic features. Zoning, density, and allowable height are identified, and images and a representative diagram of town centers are used to graphically depict the characteristic urban design features of a town center. Each type of center is described in this manner. And by that I mean a village square would have a page similar to this. The Tropico, for example, which is the urban center, would have a page like this leading into this section. Pacific Edison is identified as a town center with the potential for a new transit station to be located here, given transportation improvements from Measure M and high-speed rail. Following the land use and urban form description will be pages like this dedicated to describing any identified places categorized as that particular type of land use. Included is a description of the existing area, mapping of the defined area, and also a graphic illustration and a descriptive of the vision. So we have a descriptive wording here, but the diagram, the image, is also of that vision. And some of these early sketches you can see on the boards in the back. The design guidelines follow the place and vision descriptions. They are different from the North Glendale Community Plan guidelines that you're familiar with in that they are more oriented towards providing images rather than words. There are a lot of words, but we're leaning towards having an element and then an image that gives you a sense of what that's saying. They're ordered in, there are anywhere from 5 to 7 of these elements, with this being the most important aspect of, say, public improvements. And then these elements, of public improvements are then keyed back into one of the vision diagrams. There's a new inclusion here of public improvements that are recommendations to implement the vision. And then we also have the typical elements that that you're familiar with in doing design review, which are the site planning, mass and scale, design and detailing. And if you take all of these elements together, in the end, projecting this urban design framework of centers, corridors, districts, and now putting the centers, corridors, neighborhoods, and the districts, putting the districts back in there, this gives you a sense, this is a projection of what that would look like. 26 different places, 26 sets of guidelines. And so, shortly.
Yeah, we were looking at putting this document together with the environmental review. We feel that we need to have the environmental document out because it's going to inform some of the direction that we're looking for finalizing our draft of the plan. We have a draft of the plan right now, but until we have that environmental information, we may be making alterations to it, so that's what we're waiting for, that to come out and see what we actually have when we look at what are our impacts, particularly with Alternative 3, because that's the way we drafted it, but we realize that we may have some issues that we need to address and perhaps that we haven't thought of in the community plan that we are going to need to add before it goes out for public review. So that's where we're at right now. We're looking at bringing to you an environmental review document as well as a draft community plan sometime early in, it could be as early as late January or more likely February. And we'll be giving that to you. We will definitely do a presentation then with the actual document when you have it and give you some time to review it. We will also have the environmental review document out, so you'll have two documents. You'll have a draft EIR and you'll also have the community plan. And we'll be providing them to you. We'll be providing them to other commissions that will be making recommendations on this. The DRB, again, makes recommendations to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission, under state law, is the body that makes the official advisory board recommendation to the City Council. It's the same process that we did follow under the North Glendale Community Plan. And so with that concludes our presentation. We weren't looking for any recommendations for you or comments for today, other than if you have them, we'd love to hear them. But the recommendations we'd be asking for once you actually have the document itself.
Thank you very much. I think that we are in a very unique situation to ask some comments early on, even though you weren't expecting them. I hope it's okay to ask a few. So if
Absolutely.
there are any questions or comments.
There hasn't been a week past this year that literally every week I get a question. Why are so many developments? What's going on with traffic? What's going on with all these cars? What are we doing? I mean, why are there so many apartments coming out? So obviously we have no control over the downtown area. That doesn't come to us. So a lot of these projects that I don't even know, because I don't even get to drive down in South Glendale or around this area to see what's going on. And sometimes a pure accident that I take the brand up or orange or any of those and I see them. So with the alternative number 3, a lot of these talk that it was placed that there's a lot more denser and higher density and increase the development and bring more development into this area. Has there any thought gone into how does the traffic, because it doesn't seem like bringing transient like buses and everything will really control, based on the numbers you said that apparently 84% of the people that are going to be using South Glendale are Glendalians, but majority of that was designed so that the transits will connect Glendale to Pasadena or outside of Glendale. And that doesn't alleviate a lot of the congestions that we are facing within the South Glendale area. And that's my first question. And the second question is based on what I see, and I'm not a traffic engineer or anything, but one of the biggest bottlenecks that we have in Glendale is the entry off of Brand onto the 134. And that particular point, to me, is the most major intersection that causes majority of the traffic going down Central or going up Central or going up Brand or coming down from north to south. Everyone comes down to that point. How does this address, or does it?
Well, this certainly studies the traffic. One of the items that we had going on was that we needed to update our traffic model before we could do, or transportation model before we could do the South Glendale Community Plan EIR. So as part of this process, we do have a brand new traffic or transportation model, and it's prepared so it is consistent with the model that's done by SCAG. So we are consistent now with a regional model. So we feel we will have better traffic information than we've had in the past. This traffic model that we have is multimodal. It does look at other modes of traffic besides vehicular traffic. In terms of studying how does this community plan, does it address that intersection particularly? At this point, no. It's holistic. It's looking at all the intersections. That is one of them. So I don't know exactly what the plan will be for that till we get the EIR. Hence, that's why we're waiting for the EIR to come out in the analysis before we finalize our alternatives. We have a draft, but until we know what those are. So as part of this study, we did look at 50 different intersections. And then we looked at it for multimodal. So it's not only vehicular traffic, that's our existing model that we have, but we're also expanding it. And we're looking, does transportation make a difference? If we do have increased bus lines, if we have a rapid bus going through the city, if we, under Alternative 3, if we look at having out in the future potential for light rail, potential for additional Metrolink services, high-speed rail, what will that mean for us? And again, we wouldn't be looking at changing any zoning for multifamily, bumping anything up until we actually have transit in place. And in terms of the development potential for the neighborhoods, it's very low because of the fact a lot of the area has been downzoned significantly. If you look at our maps right now, one of the things we will be analyzing, if we look at Alternatives 2 and Alternatives 3, in terms of affordable housing, the area that you see that's cross-hatched, how many what would be the capacity for new units in that area? At this point, a lot of that area, when it was originally developed, was developed prior to 1986, and the zoning at that time allowed in certain areas R750. That's quite a bit more dense than our R1250 now. In fact, our R1250 used to be our moderate density. It's now our high density. So we've had quite a shift in the numbers of units. If you take a look at what our maximum of our general plan is now, we're in South Glendale, we're 20,000 units over what our general plan allows now because of the downzoning. So we're well aware of this. We're trying to figure out how do we accommodate new growth, which the state requires us to accommodate. Where do we put that? Where do we put it where it makes sense? And the answer is we put it where we already have transit. So that's the reason why all these alternatives, they're all based on transit, and the growth is solely based on expansion of transit. If it's not increased, the only place we would be looking at making any changes would be along Central, because that is where we already have the transit line, and then in the transit-oriented development area, right around the Metrolink, because the Metrolink is there, our highest ridership is there, our best bus service is there. So all these alternatives are really setting policy for the future. Should regional transit become available? If it's not, in all the growth scenario we would have would be based on transit expanding at a regional level. Locally, I think we're looking at Alternative 1 because it's what we have now. And again, we can't tell you what the impacts would be for transit or traffic because we haven't seen them yet. And that's the reason we're doing the environmental impact report.
It's kind of contradicting because we have big biggest portion of the South Glendale are automobiles, and we're selling cars, but at the same time, the biggest problem we have in downtown are cars. So it's like we're trying to get the cars out, but we're the largest, one of the largest dealers.
Yeah.
Well,
there-
and one of the things that, I mean, just to keep in mind is we are always going to have growth.
Right.
I mean, our major growth is natural increase. It's not coming from the outside.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have an alternative to vehicular traffic, that's all you're going to have is vehicular traffic. So these alternatives do allow us to study transit alternatives that are regional, that are local, and setting those policies. And one of the biggest issues that we have had in the past is how do we compete for dollars? How do we compete on a regional level to have regional infrastructure put in to serve people who live in Glendale? And so that's what these documents would do.
What I noticed that, as you said, the more regional, bringing transportation and everything else. But as far as locally, I mean, looking at downtown Los Angeles, they're dealing with a lot more traffic than we do in downtown Glendale, and they can handle a lot of traffic. I mean, not the freeway, obviously, but during the day, a lot of traffic is being, diverted through streets and everything. Has anybody looked into creating one-way streets like on Brand or Central or other elements there that, and now that we're looking and redesigning and creating these linear park elements there, possibly those become more further aside and creating more one-way, and that may control a lot of the traffic coming from one end and then bringing them around rather than going in two different directions.
Yeah, we did have a downtown traffic study that was done a number of years ago looking at one-way traffic, and that's certainly something that could come out as a recommendation depending on what the environmental impact report shows. But at this point, we're not proposing it. But that's not to say that it couldn't come out of the environmental analysis.
Mr. Bonian, do you have any questions or comments for staff?
This area, the cross-hashed area, what density are we talking about?
We're looking at this point, we're looking at, in the crosshatch area, bumping it up to R1250. That's our high-density residential. But again, a lot of that area was developed under R750, even more high-density than what we have now. So it might look like a large...
You're not increasing density in reality. You're just encouraging new development, basically.
We're looking at upgrading it. The other issue is for R1250 density is considered affordable housing density by the state. And so we have to show that we are providing opportunity for housing growth that would be affordable. And we have to display that not only for our residents who also need affordable housing, but also for the state that does a lot of housing funding, and they are ultimately the ones that approve our housing element. So we're cognizant that while we have local issues here, we also are dealing with a larger area. We have to comply with regional policies. We also have to comply with the state policies. And we think it makes sense to put our density, if we're going to have affordable housing, but affordable housing where people can walk to transit. And in terms of how many units that would be within the crosshatched area, we are still analyzing it now. We're not sure with the GIS exactly where these available sites would be, the actual parcels where you could develop that still have capacity and what that capacity is. So we're developing that now.
Okay. Thank you. I actually am going to not ask a question, but I'm going to make a comment and invite staff, as they're going through this process, to invite more public comment, solicit it actively. I'm looking in front of myself and I'm seeing an empty room. There is no one from the public here to hear about the future of Glendale. And this is a very exciting thing that we're talking about here. We're talking about a plan that's going to take us 25 plus years into the future. And and it is in my time, just like my colleague on DRB, I've often gotten comments about parking, traffic, and also the lack of neighborhood input. I mean, we've had many developmental projects that have come here for our review, and a consistent theme that we've heard is the developer never talked to us, right? We didn't know about it. And now the city is taking that role as a crafting a vision document to guide future development. And as we do this, I really invite staff to actively solicit input even more than you have. I mean, it's very commendable. You have the surveys in 3 languages; they're available. But I gather I would guesstimate that you don't have a very high turnout, because a lot of people that I think would be surprised that this is actually happening at this stage. And so I think we need to diligently seek more input. From a traffic perspective, I would also invite staff to consider the unique environment that South Glendale is. You mentioned 84% are renters, but there's also some other issues, right? A lot of the renters are families with multiple vehicles, with living in apartment buildings that have allocations for parking that don't conform to the number of vehicles that are owned by that family. And therefore, we have a lot of street parking. And so I think as part of this visioning, I think you need to incorporate some more modern parking solutions, such as potentially altering or allowing the construction of high-tech parking solutions, such as automated parking garages or underground automated parking storage within the new developments. This is our opportunity to jump or leap forward in our planning department, and also allowing these types of solutions in the city that are currently not allowed. You know, I had a project where I looked at potentially putting in 6 subterranean parking elevators, and everyone I talked to was like, no, don't even try in Glendale, because we're not there yet. And as space becomes more of a premium, we should be looking at these things. I think that if you had, for example, a parking lot available for the community use every 2-3 blocks, you get a lot of cars off the streets. You improve traffic flow. These are active solutions that I think I invite us to look at. And then as part of that transportation piece, I think we also would need to look at ride-sharing services like Uber and automated vehicles. I think we can't just look at bus service and light rail and the existing Amtrak and Metrolink service. I used Amtrak for 3 years on a daily or semi-daily basis, and it was great for my limited perspective of going to and from school. But outside of that, I could imagine using it for other things where I would be car dependent, right? And so with the modern advents of ride sharing and with soon to arrive, computer-driven vehicles, I think those need to be incorporated into the plan. And I invite staff to look at that as they're going through the CEQA process, as they're assessing these things, because those are more prevalent now in Glendale than the bus service or I don't know about rail, but I know that they're much more prevalent than bus service. I see a lot more people hailing Ubers and Lyft ride sharing than are hopping on and off buses. And we don't have, to my knowledge, a single designated spot for an Uber driver to pull into as they block traffic on Brand or so forth. And these are the areas where I think we can definitely improve as long as we have a vision for them. So those are my comments and my invitation for staff to consider them. I'm excited to look at the prospect of giving my feedback on the final project as we get closer to it, to the planning board, so that they can in turn advise City Council, and so that we can have a visioning document, because I think it is long overdue, and I commend staff for taking on this big challenge. With that, if there's no other comments or questions.
Actually, I just want to add on to what you just said, and this is kind of going a little bit off topic, but I'm not sure if this is the time to talk about this, but as far as the future of the transportation and the electric vehicles and other elements there that are out there, the technology. We should encourage people to incorporate electric vehicle charging stations or other elements there within their projects. Not from what I understood, that if somebody decides to add on to their existing facility an electric vehicle station, then they would technically be deducting the parking spaces that are legally theirs, and they won't be considered as an actual parking space. So by code, by City of Glendale code, they get technically penalized for them to add these stations. So I think there needs to be, at some point, in going to Christine's design guidelines, we should address and encourage people to include some green elements into their buildings, existing, or and incentivize them rather than penalize them for their. So
should be the opposite. Count
should
for
be
two cars.
It should count for 2 cars instead of 0 cars and minus.
Well, we don't want to end up with 12 electric charging stations in a building.
No.
for
But
20
they
with
shouldn't
24
be
units either.
Well, if it's 12, and let it be a station or a parking. It doesn't have to be. It can be either or. It shouldn't be.
No,
deducted.
your comments are spot on, and I think that there's never too early of a time to address a very pressing need for the city, and one that we see here in design review when we're looking at especially multi-family developments with subterranean parking, where we're guessing that aside from the design, there's going to be some logistical issues, and we're limited in what we can do from our perspective. But in this format here, we can obviously encourage staff to consider revising our parking guidelines and regulations. I mean, things we need to look at some very creative solutions as we look at potentially upping density, and transit is going to be part of that solution, and I think parking is going to be another part of that solution. With that, anything else? I want to thank staff again.
Thank you.
We do have minutes from September 22nd to approve, so we'll get those next.
Yes, and those would be.
We're absent. So I don't
Yeah, so I was absent, and we would not have quorum to approve those minutes.
You would still have 2 out of the 3 votes required for the approval of the minutes.
Okay, so with that, then I guess we can look at them. So
We'll just-
I will pass the gavel.
No, you can keep it.
Keep it.
You can keep it because board members Benlian and Malikian were present, so
Okay,
they
so
would
I'll
be the
keep
ones.
that, okay. All right, so
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, and so
no need for a roll call vote.
no need for roll call, correct.
And with that, it is with a very heavy heart that we are adjourning today's meeting because we will never again be joined by our colleague Verge Mardian, who for over 30 years was a guiding force in the city of Glendale, an amazing citizen who not only established a great architectural practice here in the city, but also, when the time came, gave back by giving his time through community service, in historical preservation, in fire safety, and also as a very active, vocal, and very detail-oriented member of the Design Review Board. He had guided me on my first days here, and I learned many, many things from him. He will be sorely missed. And in his memory, we adjourn our meeting tonight, again, with a heavy heart and with our condolences to his family. Meeting adjourned.